Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark, aka Derringer. Today is Sunday, June 11th, and you are listening to episode 109 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for Planetside 2 news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. So I hope you all have been playing a lot of Planetside 2, especially if you're on the PC side. We're going to talk about a game update in a few moments with all the tasty new implants that everybody is dying to get, myself included. Otherwise, I have been playing a bit of Planetside 2 this week, in addition to getting ready for a big cookout that we just completed as I start recording this. So if my voice sounds a little tired, it's because I'm exhausted. So without further ado, what's in store for the show this week? First up, we have that aforementioned PC game update to talk about, followed by some implant synergy combos. Then I want to head over to Iridar's Guide to the Tengu and finish up with some merchandise discussion. So strap in as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. All right, first up, like I said, June 8th, PC got a game update, and this was a long-awaited one. Well, maybe not long-awaited, but I know I've been talking about some of the things that were in this game update for a few weeks in a row now. It is not the Combined Arms update that I kind of expected. Well, not so much expected, because I know we've only really seen half of the Combined Arms update. We haven't seen all of the different air changes that we can expect to ultimately see. So I was expecting some of it, though, but clearly it's not ready yet. So let's start going through this patch point by point and find out what we did get on the PC side. And sorry, PlayStation 4 guys, you guys did not get a game update this week, and you guys seem to be falling further and further behind the PC side, even though at the beginning of the year we heard a lot of talk from Daybreak Games how they wanted to keep things as close as humanly possible between the PC and the PS4 side. I'm a little disheartened that we seem to be going in the opposite direction, and the PC seems to get a lot of these big patches, and PlayStation 4 is kind of left behind. So, PC players, without further ado, let's move forward. NSX Tengu is the first edition in this game update. It is an SMG defined by an automatic fire mode that releases 4 pellets per shot, so it's kind of like a shotgun submachine gun. It's very good for killing close quarters people. Shooting from the hip, it has a much wider spread, but while aiming down sights, it's got a much narrower pellet spread for engaging mid-range targets. I purchased the Tengu on day one and was playing around with it. I particularly like it when jumping around on a light assault player or character. It definitely is not a good hip-fire weapon. It is much better when you aim down sights, and it also, gets better if you're moving less. So certainly an interesting weapon, and I like it. It's not for everyone, and it certainly isn't the best submachine gun in the game, but it's got a gimmicky little thing to it, and I'm having fun with it right now. Next, the implant system got some new implants, and we're talking the Carapace implant, which replaces your shield bar with an additional health bar. We also got Infravision, which provides you with permanent infrared vision. We also got Nightmare, which is knife kills are going to cloak the user for a short period of time. We also got Ocular Shield, which allows you to move undetected among recon devices. We also got the class-specific ones. First up, Aerial Combatant, which is for light assaults. It regenerates jump jet fuel upon killing your enemies. The Combat Surgeon, which is for the Combat Medic. Your revives and kills are going to restore nano regen device energy. The Nanomesh Specialist, which is for heavy assault, is going to reduce the downtime for depleted overshields. The Robotics Technician, which is for engineers, is going to increase the armor of nearby deployables you own. And finally, the Deep Operative, which is for infiltrators, is going to increase the refractive capabilities of the infiltrator's cloak. The only one of these that I was dying to get on my NC character was the Robotics Technician, and I did dump about 4,000 certs into this round, and the only new one that I received was the Robotics Technician one. So I was at least happy that I did that. Unfortunately, I did not have enough ISO 4 to bump that all the way up to rank 5, which for me, as an engineer, rank 5 allows you to have either 2 hard light barriers or 2 Spitfire turrets out. So I'm going to need to grind a bit more certs and get some more ISO 4 in order to use that. And all the latest, obviously all of them at rank 5, they do have some additional little gimmicky addition to them. A little later on, I'm going to talk about some synergies amongst these new implants and the old implants that you might want to try playing around with. Next up, the implants also got a couple adjustments. Target Focus and Safeguard, these are your starting 2 implants. And Tier 2 version of common implants have been removed from all implant bundles. And the drop rates for less common implants have been improved overall. What does that really mean in terms of actual people pulling these types of things? Obviously, you're not going to get the Tier 2 versions of those first 2, but I don't think too many people have noticed that the drop rates of less common implants being improved. I know it's in the patch notes, so there must be some algorithm that is making it easier to get them. It's not been working for me. I'm still stuck mostly getting common ones. I seem to get the same one over and over and over again. So maybe it's just my shitty luck altogether. Next, we had some world updates, and specifically vehicle terminals. And what they did was that terminal types have been consolidated for all continents. This excludes Coltier. Ground vehicle terminals will now spawn all ground vehicle types with the proper benefits. Same thing with air vehicle terminals, and all vehicles can be spawned in the warp gate regardless of benefits. And those benefits now are as follows. Specifically, you must own a tech plant in order to spawn main battle tanks and liberators. And that's a big change, because previously you could get liberators at pretty much most of the air terminals out there that, not all of them, but certainly at a good portion of it, you could pull out a liberator. That is not the case anymore. You must own a tech plant. Again, you can still spawn it in the warp gate, which I know most liberator pilots do anyways. If you are to hack a tech plant terminal, you can also get a main battle tank or liberator, regardless of what faction owns the tech plant. As for amp stations moving along, they no longer increase the heat efficiency for base turrets. That benefit is now awarded on Indar Continent Lock instead. So what their amp stations are going to do now is provide turret repair over time. The biolabs are still going to provide the health regeneration in friendly regions. That has not changed. As for continent benefits, Amrish got changed. It's no longer going to reduce infantry consumables. Instead, it's going to allow base generators to regenerate 5 health per second when they are destroyed. And that's the equivalent of a 10-minute self-repair on non-SCU targets. And slightly more than a 13-minute self-repair on SCUs. Indar is no longer going to reduce air vehicle cost. Instead, it is now going to increase heat efficiency for base turrets. Again, that is previously what the amp station benefit was. Esamir is no longer going to reduce ground vehicle cost. Instead, connected bases you own now regenerate 10 infantry shields per second. And finally, Hassan remains unchanged. They didn't make a change to that particular continent benefit. So certainly a bunch of different changes to the various benefits for owning facilities and owning continents in generals. I'm kind of happy that we're no longer reducing infantry, air, or ground vehicle costs for owning various continents. It means less people are going to fight over Indar specifically just to get air vehicles, or Esamir just for ground vehicles, all those different things. I kind of like that now they've got a little bit of a different feeling to them. Again, Amrish is a nice benefit because base generators repairing, SKUs repairing, that's big. Same thing for Esamir. I think Esamir is going to be a big one to start controlling because when you're at a base that you own, you're going to regenerate 10 infantry shields per second. That's kind of big. So again, I can see more fights being pushed up to Esamir just for that particular thing. Moving along, let's talk about Amrish. Amrish got a complete refresh, a lot of improved environmental art, and many bases got some adjustments and additional polish as well. The biggest change to Amrish, or one of the biggest changes to Amrish, is Ikanem Biolab. It has finally been replaced with that which was originally on the PTS. So the Biolab itself is gone, and it is now that octagon or round thing that can be constructed upon. It also has 2 vehicle capture control points outside of the base. There's a 3rd capture point inside the superstructure that infantry can fight over. Again, you're able to construct bases on top of Ikanem, which is pretty darn cool. All the lattice links for Ikanem have been adjusted to allow players to move through satellite bases without having to pass directly through Ikanem itself, which is kind of too bad. I wish they forced you to fight through Ikanem, but they must know better on that than certainly I. The 2 remaining biolabs, this is Zealous and Onatha, had a pass on cover and overall combat flow. And we're talking things like they've got the new opaque exterior, and a lot of the spawning areas for enemies coming in. There's some new walls all over the place that make it so they can't shoot out and enemies can't shoot in. The first building with the A point is completely different. It's got some new walls built into it. It's tougher for friendly light assaults to get up into that point than it was. If you haven't played on Zealous or Onatha, you should go and check those 2 out because, like I said, they got a lot of changes to that first beginning area. Next, Subterranean Nanite Analysis, that's SNA, to everybody who knows it, has been completely removed, and its link to the lattice is completely gone. It is now just a flat area of terrain. It is now, they say, it is a prime area for vehicular combat and construction bases instead. I am disappointed that SNA has been removed from the game. I thought it was a fun base to fight over. I know shit could really hit the fan when you're down inside SNA, and maybe it was just a farming place for good players. It was a different base. It was an interesting base, and there were many levels and layers to it that made it an interesting base, and I'm sad to see SNA disappear from the game altogether. Many people will fondly remember SNA for many of the battles that have occurred there. So again, I'm sad to see SNA gone. Moving on to the Ikanem Triage Station, we got some more cover to it and improved sightlines geared toward defenders. They also refined some terrain and increased the pain field sizes around the teleporter and spawn rooms, again, to help defenders. Sungri Westgate had a restructured spawn room flow added to it, as well as an additional vehicle pad facing west. They also added some various cover improvements and other polish to the terrain. Lithcorp Central got a teleporter room bypass to stop camping from the Banana Building, or the Crescent Building as we call it. They also had some minor adjustments and additions to attack and defense routes, and they also made the vehicle pad a little bit more accessible. Moving on, the road between Araxicom Network Hub and the NC Arsenal has been completely redone to allow a more open flow that doesn't contest the auger directly, so you can kind of go around the auger when you're fighting between those two bases. Also, NC Arsenal has a new road down the mountain north, which allow players to cut closer to Moss Ravine in the fight in the field north of Sungri Westgate. The Ascent got some refined Sunderer locations, as well as some increased cover and a restructuring of the flow over the capture points themselves. A number of the jump pads got removed, and instead they added anti-infantry turrets to the tower. The lifts on the northern side of the base now only go down, which is to prevent attackers from getting up in there. And a hackable vehicle pad can now be found at the bottom. If you are attacking from Rock Slide Outlook, you can assault the base using 2 new paths that they added that actually scale up the mountain itself. Certainly a neat addition. That's it for Amrish. As you can see, we got a couple new things to it. I think Ickenham is the biggest one. If you haven't had a chance to play in Ickenham yet, now that it's on live, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't go check it out. Even Zealous and Onatha are a lot of fun to play around with, and I do like the opaque exterior now. It made everything feel like it was moving faster, and there seemed to be a lot more players in there, and I didn't feel that my frames were being restricted because it was constantly trying to render what was going on the outside, so I think it was a big addition to the game itself. Hassan, moving on. Hassan received a new clearer sky. This is something that they have been showing on Twitter for the past couple weeks. So it is no longer as dark and murky as it used to be on Hassan, so that means you need to go and play on Hassan more than you already are. Moving on, Biolabs, as I already said, the domes are now opaque, and they said specifically this is to increase performance when fighting in and around them. All Biolabs have received a new opaque dome and new interior lighting, but the performance increases is currently only available to Amrish, Hassan, and Esamir. Indar is going to get those performance increases in a later patch. Moving on, you now will log in at a Continent's Warp Gate, which is kind of a neat little addition. Let's go to construction. The Elysium Spawn Tomb. You can now get out of that spawn tomb from any direction, and it is surrounded by a one-way shield. Damaging that shield will also damage the spawn tomb. Respawn time was increased from 3 seconds to 20 seconds, and the health of the Elysium Spawn Tomb was reduced down to 8,000 from 12,000 health. Moving on to some vehicle changes. The Lightning Vanguard and Prowler. They had some overall improvements to their traction on slopes, improvements to their braking power, improvements to acceleration, and also to turn rates. And the goal is to make all 3 of those vehicles easier to pilot, easier to get up on slopes and move things around. These have been on PTS for a while now, and people have been very pleased with the changes there, so I'm happy to see those things come on to live. Next, infantry. Motion spotters, recon devices, scout radar, and proximity radar. Detection versus infantry is no longer contingent on player speed. It will now detect infantry targets that are not crouching, standing, or crouch walking. Also, I do know that motion spotters and recon devices, and I'm pretty sure scout radar, are all currently broken on live. We should see a new patch or a new quick update to fix that, a hot fix. Probably by the time you listen to the show, something will already be out to correct that issue, but I do know that that is currently an issue. And also going back to the vehicles, I also know that Sunderers and Ants received some of the combined armor variable changes or resistance type changes in this patch, and they weren't supposed to receive those changes. So right now, Sunderers and Ants are a little beefier than they should be on live. Most likely that will get hot fixed as well. Moving on to the hard light barrier, the deploy time was decreased drastically. It used to be 1,000 milliseconds. It's down to 100 milliseconds, so you'll be able to place new hard light barriers a lot quicker. Also, the deploy slope limit was changed from 20 degrees up to 30 degrees, and the draw fire ribbon kill requirement was dropped down to 15 kills from 20. So hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier to get some of those draw fire ribbons, because I know a lot of us who are playing with the hard light barrier are still having a hell of a time getting draw fire ribbons. I'm sure someone out there has Araxiumed it, but I'm not. No one has come out and said that they have it this time. Once I get my robotics technicians to rank 5, I will probably be playing my barrier bros loadout. That's what I call my hard light barrier loadout. I will probably be playing that a little bit more than I currently am now. The Claymore got some changes as well. The detonation angle was changed from 90 to 135 degrees. Do note that this does not widen the trigger area, just the detonation angle itself. EMP grenades got some changes as well. The cost of them, which was 75, was reduced down to 50. It is no longer draining ability energy, and it no longer disables the Sunderer deployment shield. It will still drain the minor cloak implant. It will still drain the Sunderer cloak. And it will also drain any infantry affected by the Sunderer cloak. It is just not going to disable the deployment shield. It is no longer going to clear out your HUD indicators either. It is still going to show the HUD static, though. And they did fix an issue where players within line of sight in greater than 12 meters but less than 15 meters would only have their shields reset instead of taking them offline. So big changes to the EMP grenades. I don't know that I'm happy with all these particular changes, especially that it doesn't drain ability energy. I thought that was a good thing for it to do. So I'm just satisfied to see that change, but again, it's just something that we have into the game. Moving on to the AV mana turret, it is now going to render more often at farther ranges. Don't forget that in a patch not too long ago, the render range was, or the projectile range was reduced a ton because of these render issues. It now sounds like the mana turret is going to render further out than the actual damage of the projectile itself, which is only good for tankers and things like that. Moving on, Underbarrel Grenade Launcher had its ammo capacity increased slightly to 3. The Underbarrel Smoke Launcher also had its ammo capacity increased as well to 3. It also had its ammo resupply tick rate increased from 4,000 to 5,000 milliseconds, and it now has a two-time headshot multiplier like the Underbarrel Grenade Launcher currently has. So basically making the smoke launcher much like the grenade launcher. So go out there and start getting headshots with your smoke launcher shells. Finally, emergency repair for the Maxes. It now has a new particle effect on use. And they also fixed an issue with where using this ability would create broken infiltrator cloak states after use. So other than that, so now basically when a Max pops this, you're going to see that they're actually using this to repair themselves, which means if you don't have something that shows what their health is, that you should unload everything you possibly can on them. Other than that, there were quite a few different bug fixes that we got on this patch as well. I didn't see anything that was game-breaking previously that needed to be talked about, so I've just kind of left all those various things out. So as you can see, quite a large game update that we got to this particular week, and if you haven't gotten in-game to play with it, you should. Topic number 2 this week is implant synergy combos, and I do have to say a thank you to, I believe it was Mixter1 who posted this up on Reddit, and he wanted to go through a bunch of different combinations that he thought people should go and try out because they have some kind of interesting synergy. He says that if you are curious to go play with what he's calling the heavy medic class, which combines the Carapace implant and the Combat Surgeon implant. And the synergy between these two is that you should get continuous healing without shield delay, combined with damage resistance from revives, which should create a highly survivable and lethal combination. So basically, you want to start engaging enemies right after you've revived an ally to get the full benefit of the combo. All kills after the revive are going to add to your survivability since you gain health regen for them. Also, because you have Carapace, you've got no shield, you've just got double health. So if you revive an ally every 3.5 seconds, you're going to maximize damage resistance uptime, which means you're not even going to need advanced shield capacitor in this case, and you can go with Nano Weave to increase your damage resistance. Certainly an interesting combo when you've got both those things out to rank 5. Next up, something he's calling the Ghost is combining Minor Cloak and Nightmare. So this is basically for non-infiltrator classes that are cloaked before and can remain cloaked during an engagement. So he suggests moving to a location beforehand where you assume multiple enemies are going to pass or linger close to each other. You want to rapidly engage the targets within 2-second intervals most of the time. One from real close range with a high kill per time weapon like a shotgun or a knife. And you're going to be able to remain cloaked during the entire engagement as you kill player after player after player. Because obviously Nightmare is the newest one that allows you to cloak after kills. Really powerful at rank 5. The next one he's calling Jack the Ripper, which is Nightmare and Deep Operative. Those two together are going to make it difficult to detect your infiltrator, and you're going to be able to remain cloaked during a melee kill streak. I particularly like using those two together. That sounds pretty damn awesome. Something about Nightmare that people aren't realizing also is that Nightmare is working on friendly kills. So it doesn't matter who you kill while you have Nightmare equipped, friendly or enemy, you're going to cloak after you kill them. So just something to keep in mind. Next is one he's calling Long Shield, which is combining Assimilate and the Nano Mesh Specialist, so this is heavy assaults only. Obviously, your accuracy is going to reward you with a ton of shield uptime. Really good for defensive play where enemies are going to confront you one at a time. And the steady flow of headshots is going to keep your shield up for extended periods of time. Certainly a good, interesting combo. The next one he's calling MLG, and he wants to combine Carapace and Battle Hardened. Combining this with a heavy assault resist shield, you're going to get a huge health pool and really high accuracy while under fire, and you should be able to push out on objectives really well with this. Using resto kits or med kits is going to give you super health regen to a really big health pool already. And since you'll be using Resist Shield and Nano Weave, you're going to mitigate incoming damage a ton. Basically, you can push and push and push as long as you have health available to regenerate. Certainly an interesting combo nonetheless. Next, he's calling one a Vehicle Main, and that's adding Sweeper HUD and Ammo Printer. If you're aware of Explosive and you have infinite ammo, it's kind of a no-brainer. And the final one he suggests is one he calls Flanker, which is combining Sensor Shield with Counterintelligence. And it's a combination of keeping you off the minimap and knowing when you're spotted is going to greatly aid you in remaining undetected and to engage while flanking enemies. A really good one for light assaults who are jumping from roof to roof and are worried about being detected by high-level players. Things like that. Certainly an interesting combo. I'd really like to try playing around with that MLG one, the Carapace and Battle Hardened, on a heavy assault and see how I can do. And I also would really like to unlock Nightmare and play around with Nightmare a lot. Because like I said, I play NC a lot and I can kill a lot of friendly players. If you have any good combos, feel free to email them into the show. I'm curious what you guys are playing with as well. Third topic this week, I'm going back to the well. That is Iridar's highly technical weapons guides. because this week he released a weapons guide about the NSX Tengu. As I said 2 topics ago, Tengu is the new submachine gun shotgun that was added to the game in the PC game in the most recent patch. As Iridar writes, it is an unusual hybrid between shotgun and SMG. It's going to fire 4 pellets with each shot. Each pellet's doing minor damage. The pellet spread is reduced, like I said, while aiming down sights, which boosts the effective range. It excels at dealing constant damage or at consistently dealing damage to enemies, even against mobile, or when the user makes aiming mistakes. He feels that the Tengu is a perfect submachine gun for newbies and low-aim players. I think I fall into that sort of category, even though I aim down sights a lot, but maybe I don't really fall into that. He does confirm that firing from the hip is a bad idea for the Tengu because it has an extremely large pellet spread when you're firing from the hip. He says you almost always want to be aiming down sights unless the enemy is pretty much right in front of you. He does hypothesize that because of this bad firing from the hip, that it most likely will receive a buff in the near future. Next, he goes on to reveal some pros and cons to the Tengu. The pros, and these are pros and cons with firing multiple projectiles with each shot. He does say the pro is that it makes it easier to consistently inflict some damage even when the target is dodging. This gives the Tengu the affinity for close quarters combat, and like he says, makes it friendly towards new players and low aim players. And you're also less affected by flinch after getting shot. The cons, though, is that the optimal DPS is harder to reach. The damage is reduced if the target is partially protected by cover. And it's also harder to focus your damage output at a particular point, such as an enemy's head, because of the spread from the pellets themselves. Next, Iridar gives his optimal loadout for the Tengu. In his opinion, you should be using a one-time sight, you should be using the flash suppressor, you should be using soft point ammunition, and using extended mags. There's not too many attachment choices. He feels the regular suppressor is not worth its downsides, and the hybrid laser doesn't really provide a strong benefit. So really, when you exclude those things, this is why he recommends what he does. And this is exactly what I'm running with the Tengu itself when I'm playing with it, and I find that it's working quite well, especially the extended mags. Without the extended mags, I felt like it just didn't have enough rounds in the chamber when I was trying to take down enemies that were hopping or jumping or moving all over the place. In closing, he feels that you got to realize that firing from the hip is bad. You never want to hip fire. It feels a lot like other submachine guns regardless. He says to remember to close the distance before engaging with targets and take advantage of the short reload time. Basically, you want to kill an enemy and then step back and reload, and then get back in and go after the next enemy. He also says get a good sidearm and get good with it because you're going to rely on it a lot, similar to any other submachine gun that you play. Also to be careful when you're engaging enemies in partial cover because you're not going to be dealing a lot of damage to them. And one last thing, he says when you're engaging enemies at range, you can boost your accuracy by standing still or crouching. And just be careful about being sniper bait itself by not moving at all. Again, certainly an interesting little weapon. I did purchase the Tengu, and I purchased the complete bundle for it, so I unlocked everything for it in one go across all my characters so I could play around with it. I'm enjoying it as light assault. It's an interesting little gun to play. I haven't played around with it on Infiltrator yet. That's probably next where I'll go with it and see how it works on an Infiltrator role. But light assault, I'm liking it. It's not the best submachine gun in the game, like Iridar says, but it's something different. So I'm playing around with it, and if you've got the certs to spend on it, you should play around with it too. All right, last topic this week. There was a post from Crazy Hank 100 on Reddit who asked if people want merchandise for the game, and a lot of people did want merchandise. A lot of people were looking for T-shirts or hats with more than just a logo. A lot of them were looking for the dog tags. Some people were looking for action figures, things like that. Only 21% said that they did not want any merchandise at all, so a little less than a quarter of all people didn't want any merchandise in the game at all. I do want merchandise in Planetside 2. I have a lot of merchandise talking about it, because obviously I went to a couple SOE Lives. So when I went to SOE Live, I did have the ability to purchase Planetside 2 stuff while I was there. I didn't purchase any particular T-shirts while I was there, but I did purchase a Vanu Sovereignty mouse pad, which I particularly like. It's an oversized mouse pad, and I know that they had New Conglomerate and Terran Republic ones as well. I'm a little sad that I didn't pick up those other two. So I do know that Daybreak Games does have some merchandise for the game. I'm not sure what they're actually still sitting on, but there's certainly got to be something out there. I'm sure they probably still have some dog tags as well. Obviously, I went to SOE Live, and I got a good supply of dog tags when I went there. I probably still have 3 or 4 sets of them. I keep giving them away. When I mail out prizes to winners on this show, if I know what faction you are, I try to enclose some dog tags too, so you can have that as a little cool keeper for the game itself. I'm also kind of a little crazy about the game as well. I've got the poster on the wall. I've got the 3 faction-specific CDs from Planetside framed up on my wall as well, along with the art from the game box. I also have gone out on eBay, and I picked up one of the Showdown event custom jerseys that they had printed for them. I got a Vanu Sovereignty jersey on eBay. I also picked up one of the limited run of the developer jackets on eBay as well. So I've got a New Conglomerate developer jacket that I particularly love. But there's certainly more things out there for Planetside 2 that I would love to get my hands on. And I would hope that Daybreak Games thinks about these things, because if they are sitting on a supply of mouse pads, I think they should do a run of them and try and get rid of them. Or if they are sitting on a bunch of dog tags as well, they should think about selling some of those and getting rid of some of those as well. T-shirts that they have instead of just the logo ones, which you can still get the logo ones through Jinx. I think they're on Amazon as well. If you go to my Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com, I have links to the T-shirts on Amazon that you can buy. If you do buy one through that link, I get a little kickback from that. So feel free, if you're looking for some kind of in-game logo type stuff, T-shirt stuff, you can certainly do that. But I would love to see Daybreak Games come out with some more merchandise for the game. I think we're at a point now where the game has been out long enough, and there is this veteran fan base that would pick up some merchandise like that. Like mouse pads, for example, are an easy one. I'm sure that they could get with a distributor for mouse pads, license their design that they've got out there, and get a whole bunch of them printed and have people buy them. I'm sure that there would be an initial huge push to get a bunch of those mouse pads out there. So hopefully if Daybreak Games listens to this week's show, that they hear that there is a call for merchandise out there. I know Brian Burness was on the Reddit post about merchandise, which I'll include a link to, saying he'd love to see little miniatures built that some people are 3D printing, and get some of those out to players as well. So maybe if players are looking for this, and this is another line of revenue for Daybreak Games, they'll consider doing this. I, for one, would love to purchase more merchandise, especially if it helps support the game. So enough about merchandise, though. Let's move on to this week's housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
Housekeeping.
Go away.
I coming anyway?
All right, so I did get a follow-up email from my the email that I received last week. And if you recall, it was from the Pink Fairies, and I originally thought the email was from D-Drag. I got a follow-up, and it was from the actual sender of the email. And he had just included his first name, and I didn't want to read his first name out there, so I just made an assumption. The email was actually from Pipeline Audio, and he wrote, "The last email was sent by me, Pipeline Audio, not D-Drag." He's probably going to be ribbing me about the podcast. Anyway, here is another version, popping Sundays over walls and floating the squad in using tank mines. And he provided me another link to another amazing YouTube video. I love what these guys are doing, using in-game physics to do absolutely crazy things. I know that when I linked that video on last week's podcast, somebody quickly picked it up and showed it on the Reddit and got a whole ton of upvotes for something that Pipeline Audio sent me. And I don't think it was actually him that put it up. Maybe it was, and if that's the case, good for him. But I'd hate to think somebody was listening to my show and saying, "Oh, I got to show everybody this; they don't know about it," and then taking credit for it. But either way, I will include a link to this one as well, because they're doing more amazing stuff with Sundays. And again, they float an entire squad over the wall using tank mines. Awesome, awesome stuff. Keep it up, Pipeline Audio, and I'd love to see more from you. All right, that is going to be it, though, for this week's show. How can you get in touch with me or the show? As always, you can visit my website. It's www.instantactionpodcast.com. Send me an email like Pipeline Audio did, instantactionshow@gmail.com. Call me, leave me a voicemail, 347-486-4772. Again, that's 347-4BM-4PS2. The show's Twitter is @InstActPodcast, and my personal Twitter is @TheDarringer. So in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening, and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button.